Welcome back to another edition of Fire Engineering's Tactical Impact. I'm your host, Chief Jim Silvernail, and my co-host, Jason Hoevelmann, will be joining us shortly. Unfortunately, we're both fire chiefs. I'm just kidding. We're very proud to be fire chiefs, but fire chiefs do take a role, and Jason's been called away for a couple minutes, but he'll be here. But today, this is the show about tactics. We talk about tactics and how they make an impact on our fireground. We like to highlight classes that are either at FDIC, upcoming at FDIC, or a concept or article out of fire engineering. And that's no different this month. This month we'll be highlighting a new author in our magazine, and it's from the June edition. And this is Jake Jorgenson, who I'm going to introduce here in a second. And his article is entitled, give me a second, Structure Fires with Minimal Staffing, Are You Ready? As many of you know, I'm all on board this topic. Great topic for the fire service and relevant to the vast majority of fire departments out there across the United States. We take for granted that, a lot of us aren't in that urban corridor that has an abundance of resources. So very relevant topic. And I want to hear what he has to say. I've read the article and phenomenally written, and I want to get his take. But Jake, first of all, let's talk about you. Tell me a little bit about yourself and about where you're from.
Okay. Well, first off, thank you for giving me the kind words about the article. That's great to hear. But yeah, my name's Jake Jorgenson. I'm a lieutenant with Watertown Fire Rescue. There's a ton of different Watertowns throughout the nation, but Watertown, South Dakota, it's in the very northeastern part. We're about an hour away from the North Dakota border and an hour away from the Minnesota border. So kind of lets you know where we're at. I have 18 total years in the fire service. When I started, I started as a volunteer in Waubay, which is a smaller town, just about an hour north of here. Only about 600 people. But fresh out of high school, I started volunteering for that department. That was my hometown. That's where I grew up. Lake Area Tech. It's a community college in Watertown. They just started a med fire rescue program, which I was able to get my firefighter 1, 2, and paramedic through that. So I took that. While I was going to school, I got hired on in Watertown Fire Rescue, and that's kind of where I'm at. So I've been with Watertown for 16 years, kind of went up through the ranks. Now my current position is lieutenant on C shift. So a little bit about the department that I come to, or Watertown Fire Rescue, the department I come from. We're an all hazards department. We're one of 5 career departments in Watertown or in South Dakota. We have a staff of 36, so 12 per shift. We just do three shifts. There's 4 admin. We're all hazards, and we also have commercial flights flying in and out, so we're all ARP certified as well. And then we are it's a state task force team. So all of the 5 or 4 of the 5 career departments make up South Dakota Task Force 1, which we do USAR hazmat for the state if needed as well. The city that I work for, we have a population of about 23,000. Our fire district is 326 square miles. So it's just kind of a smaller city, but we do a lot of outreach throughout the county. So our EMS district is the whole county. We used to have some smaller services in the county, but then, we just ended up kind of helping them out and kind of taking over all of the county for EMS. So that we have about 28,000 residents in the county that we help. And then there's 4 small towns that we cover EMS wise as well. So I kind of, what I really liked with this article, or why I wrote this article, is the whole, the being in command and, just kind of making do, or, how do we, work efficiently and effectively with what we have? Because for us, we're working 12 per shift. That's not including, people calling in sick, vacation times, things like that. It's not uncommon for us to respond to a structure fire with 8 people, maybe 10 people. So it is kind of trying to figure out how can I do better with what we have. Efficiency and effectiveness is kind of the big thing that we're after. So yeah, I just kind of, I kind of thought about it a little bit and just kind of put my thoughts to words, and yeah, that's kind of how that all came about. So I guess, what would you like to really kind of know about?
Yeah, so let's talk about your department a little bit. What kind of, do you have automatic aid that comes in, or do you have to basically operate on your own?
Okay, so in the city, we don't have automatic aid. We have callback. So, we have our minimum staffing, and once we reach that, we're, able to call in guys that are off duty. Out in the county, it's not automatic. It's requested mutual aid. So if we have a fire out in the county, we may ask for one of those smaller towns to come in with their volunteer fire department to help us. And it's usually, bringing people and water is what we need a lot of times. So,
yeah. So Jason just joined us. Welcome, Jason. I was telling everybody you were doing fire chiefing.
I was doing fire chiefing. Yes. We're skeleton crew on this Friday, and so I've been called into service more often than maybe normal.
Like I said, the company officer position is the best position in the fire service. I suggest you stay there. No, I'm kidding. Someone's got to do it. But no, so we take it for granted. Jason and I are from suburban backgrounds, but we're from a pretty big county where we have a large amount of resources. Our staffing might be as not highly as staffed as an urban area, but we still have some of the same issues with the lower staffed engines. But what we take for granted is what you're talking about. And that is, you have a definite limited amount of resources and you have to be effective with that. So, like I said, I looked through your article and I really liked, some of the stuff you put and the realities that you're facing and the assignments that you have to make into the pre-plan of this. And that's so important when you realize that you're understaffed, the pre-planning aspect. So kind of talk about that a little bit.
Okay, so the pre-planning or the assignments and the pre-planning is actually fairly new. When I first started, we didn't really have the assignment or pre-arrival assignments or anything like that. It was more of you're riding in the back seat, your company officer says, "Hey, I need you to pull a hand line." We're kind of talking en route. But once I became an officer, I kind of was used to that. So that was what I was going with, was I'm just going to tell the guys what I need done. But we were just kind of doing an off-duty training one day and talking with the shift. A lot of the guys wanted to know what's expected of them, and they wanted to know what's expected of them prior to those calls. So that I sat down with the other lieutenant, we talked about it, and we actually kind of came up with what we think would be good assignments. Did some research online. There's all kinds of resources out there, so we kind of we copied a little bit of, what's out there, what worked for us, what can we change? But yeah, so we kind of came up with our assignments. Our department, we don't run true ladders. So our first dues are going to be 2 engines. Our ladder truck that we have is going to be kind of a second due rig. So, or a second alarm type rig, we could call it. So it's really not ever coming first due. So we just kind of worked with the 2 engines. What can we do with our engines? And so our positions, just example for us, we have the driver, or it's called FAO in our department. So fire apparatus operator, the officer, we have the nozzle firefighter and the irons firefighter. Just kind of like the article says, their jobs are pretty much straightforward. Whatever their title is, that's kind of what their job is. The nozzle firefighter, their job is they're going to be sitting behind the officer in our engines. They sit behind or behind the FAO in our engines. So the nozzle firefighter's job, they're going to try to estimate that setback, that stretch. What line are they going to be pulling? We run both combination and smoothbore lines, so they're picking which line to pull, unless that company officer says something different. So nozzle firefighter, they're worried about the stretch. That's what they have to worry about for that call or that day. The irons firefighter, that's going to be sitting directly behind the officer. How are we going to get in the house? Is there a fence? They're worried about forcible entry. After that forcible entry job is done, they're helping that nozzle firefighter with the stretch. And then they're kind of, if we need it, they're that door control firefighter. Once that's done, they're bumping up on the interior to help with that search. The officers, kind of, running that truck. So they're pretty much the tactical supervisor for whatever's needed, if they're first due or second due rig, whatever task is assigned to them, that's what they're worried about. And then our FAO, they're the ones getting us there safely and quickly, and then giving that team whatever they need. So, but we kind of thought about it. It's like, so why we did that? Like I said, the guys wanted to know what to do, what's expected of them. So, after we kind of we hashed it out, we had some shift meetings about it. We kind of really just liked it and just kind of flowed with it, and it has been working for us. So not only did we just do the seating assignments, we actually kind of thought about, our common calls that we have, structure fires, car accidents. We have a lot of grass fires. So what is their job for each of those types of calls? And then we just kind of keep that nozzle, irons. We keep the titles the same, but we kind of put different expectations for the type of call.
On your apparatus operator, your engine drivers, in the article, it talks about what they're going to do. Have you talked about, especially with short staff companies, some ancillary tasks that they can do once they get the engine and the hose and all of that taken care of? Do you have discussions or additional guidelines that give those apparatus operators some latitude to maybe fill in some gaps? And what would those be?
Yeah, absolutely. So, sometimes we'll even have them help soften the structure, especially when all the lines are set and in place. If we're working on second floor or anything like that, it's the engine drivers or the FAO's, duty pretty much. Let's get a ladder up there to the second floor for that second egress. If we're working first floor, we can get that backup line pulled. We don't always charge that backup line, but if they're open and available to, they can pull that backup line if it's needed as well. And then also too, they're thinking of what tools are we going to need. They're setting up that tool drop, that rehab drop and everything. So we're swapping out SCBA bottles. We just have everything. It's kind of a nice organized scene instead of just having stuff thrown around. So.
Yeah, I mean, everybody who's on that fireground is essential in your world, and they have to be used at the most efficient way and the most effective way for your success. How important is it that they have to be detailed and not freelance?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So, and again, that's, with those assignments, they know their expectations. So if this is their job for the day, they know what they need to have or what needs to be done, especially for whatever type of call that we're working on. We always have the ability as officers to call that audible. So it's not, just because we have our assignments, it's not set in stone, because, there's all kinds of different factors on a fireground. So, we always still have that ability to call the audibles, but we have that baseline play to fall back on. So everybody kind of knows their expectations. So I should, like I said, I'm going, let's say we're fighting a fire on the second floor. I should expect to be hearing, once everything is set and working, I should be expecting to hear over the radio, hey, we have ladder, Alpha Side, Division 2, just so we know where our second egress is.
Did you mention earlier that you guys have fire-based EMS?
Yes. Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
And how important is it to use them within this fire attack?
Okay.
And how do you use them?
So with our medics or our ambulance, it's usually a crew of two. How we use those, they have their gear on the ambulance. They are kind of an exterior unit, just because, like I said earlier, we provide EMS not only for the city of Watertown, but for the whole Cottington County as well. So they are still subject to call. So that's kind of our tricky area. So what we do is they get on scene, they dress out in their turnouts and all that stuff. They get a pack on. They're ready to work if needed, but they're doing exterior work. So right away, typically a common thing that we use our EMS for is they're getting our water supply. They're helping, either we call it backjacking to the hydrant. So they're taking the hose from the engine. If it's, maybe 100 feet away or something like that, they're dragging that hose from the engine to the water supply, hooking it up, or they're helping that secondary truck come in and get that water supply. Once water supply is done, and if we don't have our callback in yet, so we'll be calling an overtime if there's a structure fire. Once overtime has said, "Hey, we're here at the station, we'll cover EMS," then we can put our EMS crew to work a little bit more. But we like to typically keep them just doing exterior work right away. So they can be helping that engine driver, throw ladders. If they need to, we can, soften up the structure a little bit from the exterior. We also use them as our initial RIT. So they're kind of our two out. But again, they are subject to call out. So in a perfect world, when everybody is, on scene and we can, just operate as our plan, it works really good. But again, we had that audible. If there's an EMS call that comes in, we have to quick call that audible. We have to change our plan, just to keep everybody safe. So
there is no perfect world.
No.
Yeah, we say it a lot, but it's rare that we end up with a perfect world on any call. You've got these descriptions pretty well described in your article, and I think you did a good job laying that out. I think something sometimes that gets overlooked, and maybe you can help expand on this because I'm sure that you're addressing it, is that when you're dealing with short-staffed companies and you've got these assignments, how do you set up drills and training to be able to adapt to the challenges that come with being short-staffed, and when things don't work out exactly the way they need to, you've got a small margin of error, and how you address that in your training?
So with that, it all kind of starts off, you have to know the basics. You have to understand the job. You have to know, what's expected of you. So if they're a nozzle firefighter, me as a company officer, I expect them to understand engine work. So how we do that is it can be anything just from tabletop discussion, tabletop drills. We'll just kind of randomly pull out in the back. We'll just do like 1410 drills, so let's tag that hydrant, let's pull a line, let's get it all done in a time trial. And we'll just even set up just mini scenarios to work through things. In the winter months, we might, we'll use just like Fire Studio and just some of those computer-based programs. We'll just talk out a call. Like, this is let's just say, here's the structure where we're dealing with. Your nozzleman for the day, your irons for the day. What are you going to do? And really what that does is it lets us all just kind of discuss. We get to understand, what everybody's thinking, and we kind of be able to get into each other's heads a little bit. So the more we do that, the more we understand how each other's thinking as a shift and a crew. So again, it's, practice is key. But the more you do it, the more you're going to understand how each other thinks. And, you'll be able to do a lot of stuff with very little talking.
Jason, how important are those 1410 drills?
Oh, they're critical. And also, people sometimes overlook that the definition for what the first attack line is for is in 1410, and it's not what many people maybe think it is.
That's a great point. Yeah, if you think about it, these understaffed departments, you really, to make that, and I hate to be cliche, but to make that tactical impact, you really have to get water at the seat of the fire as quickly as possible. I mean, that's everybody's goal, right? I mean, no matter what fire department in the world, your goal is to get water on the fire as soon as possible. However, in certain circumstances, if you don't do that, especially in a short staff world, it's a loser. I mean, it's an absolute loser. So you have to be prepared to do that. And I'm not saying that, let's face it, these firegrounds are unequal playing fields because some have more resources than others. And you really have to be on the ball. Not that all agencies aren't, but you really have to be on the ball.
Yeah, for sure. And then there's so many different, you throw a victim in there, you have that, what do you do? Like, do you have the resources and the capability to get that person out, or do you protect in place, work on that fire till more resources arrive? You just kind of have to, play it by ear in a way. So,
and I think that's what Jason was hinting to on the 1410 descriptions, completely about what is our goal? What is our goal on the fireground?
Yep.
Right. Yeah, that first line, and this becomes the challenge with short staff companies, and short staff's relevant, right? It's relevant to where you are and your department, and if you have automatic aid, all of those things are relevant. I would argue that most of us in the country are operating from a technical definition of short staffed, right? There's usually an empty seat on our apparatus somewhere, and it's difficult for us to split companies and so on and so forth, the way that NIST studies showed that we needed to. And of course, right now, the big discussion is for Massachusetts, right? And the fire they just had up there in that assisted living complex. But back to 1410 and the importance of understanding strategy and employing tactics properly to ensure that you've got staffing to do what you need to do is 1410. The definition, paraphrasing, is basically that first line is stretched to facilitate the search and rescue of victims. It's not for extinguishment. So that means that you can take a tactical approach, and maybe you can talk a little bit about that, because you do reference the firefighter rescue survey in your article, the first 3,000 rescues, and maybe just kind of talk about how you deal with that challenge. And sometimes you have to, especially if you have young nozzle firefighters or young officers, it's ingrained in them to put the fire out, which we do want to, but sometimes it's confinement, right? And just maybe speak on that and how you address that with a short staff department.
Yeah. So with that, you have to figure out, like I said, you have to play it by ear. That's always a huge discussion at the kitchen table, guys will be sitting down for breakfast, and one of our stations. So, we have two stations our fire department does. One is out by the airport. It's only staffed with 3, sometimes 4 firefighters. And then there is a neighborhood right beside it. So there's a little community there. We always talk about, what happens, let's just say there's a victim, in this area. It's station 2's first due. Station 1 is probably about 5 minutes away. How are we going to do it if we know there's we arrive on scene, somebody saying, oh, there's my so-and-so is still in the house. What do we do? There's a lot of discussion around that topic. There's a lot of factors. Is that person still, are they visible? Are they hanging out the window? I know right there's where they are. Or did they say that's their room? Do I make the VES, or do we go and make the stretch, try to slow that fire down while we're searching? We're kind of working on that type of topic. So really with that, I'm just trying to think how to phrase this a little bit better here, but with just sorry here. I'm just trying to think this out here a little bit. Like, we have to do the best with what we have. So again, like you said, we're just trying to confine that fire. We're protecting that victim while we're waiting for that second company, especially if we don't know where they are. Because again, we're arriving on scene with possibly 3 people. So, we have to do get our, the most bang for our buck per se. So, like I said, it could be, 5 minutes out. But, the studies have shown if the quicker we can get in there and hold on, you got me for a good one on this one. I hope this can
you're
get
good. You're good to go.
Oh man,
I know where you're going with this. So, what the importance here is strategy. You have to you have to understand strategy and not just get that blinder on that it's just about pulling a line off, putting water on fire. You don't give the cop size up of the wet stuff puts out the red stuff, and that's what we do. But how important is strategy when it comes to when you have only such a limited amount of people to make it happen? So you have to think of what's the priority here. And that really goes back to I have to locate, contain, confine, extinguish. Because if you skip any of those steps, you're going to have a big problem. And
for sure.
Especially if you're lower staff, like you said, if you don't have all the people to make that happen, you really got to concentrate and put everything in a logical, prioritized order.
Yeah. Yeah. Like you have to, like I said, prioritize is key. What can I do to make the most good with what I have? And again, sometimes the popular answer is go for the grab. But again, if they're there like waving at me, absolutely throw the ladder, get that person out. But if they said, I have an adult, it's my 16-year-old son sitting in that upstairs, that's his room right there. I don't know if he's in that room or not. I have heavy fire in the first floor. He might have been trying to get out and got overcame by that environment. So it's the tough call. Like, do I put the fire out or do I go in for the rescue? That's.
Well, I think that's a common dilemma for a lot of us, in the fire services, that we don't show up with a truck and an engine, so that you have to make that incredibly hard decision that and you don't face it every day, So it's the actual. It's going to hit you and surprise you, but you have to be ready for it. And once again, it goes back to training and discipline and understanding the big picture.
Yeah.
Yeah. And your article mentions using RECOVS, and I think that's a great way to stay on strategy. But I think that E for exposures gets overlooked and gets associated with exterior exposures frequently, and a lot because that's what a lot of the text in the fire, the 1010 classes teach. But in your situation, the exposures are any uninvolved areas inside that building that may be tenable and searchable, and delay one way or the other could certainly negatively impact those interior exposures. A stairwell, like you said, maybe that victim had tried to go down the stairs and now is overcome. And so it's a trade-off, right? And when you have limited staffing, like you said earlier, that ideal world, we would have a company go to the fire and a company go to the floor above. But for a lot of us, that's just not real. And so those are the discussions. And then you lean back to RECIO, right? Rescue, exposures, and those interior exposures, if we can protect that space, is going to be a lot better for any victims in there. That does allow for that search to happen. And it's always a dilemma, and it's always Absolutely. Remember that we don't have the perfect world.
Yes. Yeah. Again, like I said, you have to make do with what you have. So.
Oh no, absolutely. I mean, it's like I said, and I think you made that point very well in your article about having to prioritize. It's not just rescue either. There's other, the coordinated fire attack, ventilation. I would almost venture to say, I've never been to your fire department. I've been to South Dakota, but I'd almost venture to say that you don't get on many roofs. And it's not because you're afraid, and it's not because you don't know how, but it's because of what?
Staffing,
right.
Yep.
And how many people, can you, if you only have so many people for that fire attack, But I'll let you talk about that.
Yeah. So, you only have so many people. There's a lot of jobs that need to be done in a very short amount of time on fireground. So, like I said, ventilation, we do different. We'll do a lot of horizontal and hydraulic ventilation. So, we've talked about, possibly splitting crews to help, especially like a second due crew. Most of the time, our first due rig is going to be primary fire attack. That's their job right away, unless something happens. Second due, typically they're going to be doing that search and those other odd jobs that may need to be done. So the good thing about horizontal ventilation, it doesn't take a lot of people to do it. So, again, we can split that crew, firefighter and the officer. They can go in, do a search off the second due truck, and that second due truck FAO, they're going to be pulling the fan off or, popping a window, whatever they need to do for that horizontal ventilation to help those inside crews. And then,
that's the big question.
Yeah, and then two, we even kind of start teaching our people, isolation. Isolation is key. So especially, have the building work for you in a way. So if we can go in there and start shutting down, first off, we can confine that fire to the room of origin, or that, area of origin, I should say. Good for us, that's awesome. Then we can get in there searching. We can start ventilating as long as we get that or keep that stuff isolated. We want to try to do the best for our victims or, possible victims while still, being able to stay in the fight. So.
Jake, the one thing you do mention towards the end of the article, and we'll start moving in that direction here, is, there are trade-offs or sacrifices you mention or drawbacks when it comes to some of the things that are associated with how you have to operate at a short-staffed incident, or when you don't have 6 trucks coming. And one of the things you mentioned I thought was really interesting that I think maybe doesn't get discussed a lot, and just talk a little bit how you overcome that, is that the company officer, unfortunately, in a lot of these instances, has to do 2 things. That person has to be this, the tactical position to oversee things, but also ends up as a task level person as well. Just kind of talk about how you've overcome that and how you train and deal with that on these scenes.
Yes. Yeah. So that's, like you said, we're rolling in, not a lot of people. There might be time where I myself as a company officer, I'll be the backup person on the hand line. So it takes a lot of discipline, and I've kind of started to learn how to do that. When I was the first new company officer, I'd still be, itching to get the nozzle, I wanted to put the fire out and all that stuff. It took a while to, realize that's not my job anymore. So it takes a lot of discipline to just kind of learn how to be helpful, yet to stand back and get that big picture, because as that tactical supervisor, we're in charge of our people. We're in charge of our crew. So, that nozzle firefighter, they're worried about, getting that water placement, doing what they need to do. It is my job now as their backup or as a company officer to be looking around at that other stuff, looking around at the building conditions, smoke conditions. Are we winning? Are we losing on the fire attack? And this even kind of that level head. Let's just say we're crawling in and we find a victim. Let's just say we find a victim on fire attack. What do we do? The adrenaline's rushing. You probably just want to shut the line out and get that person out. That's probably not going to be, what's really good. You have to tell that nozzle firefighter to keep that fire going, because victim removal is, depending on where they're at, can be slow. So, we got to protect that path of egress on the way out too. So again, we shut that line down, everything's going to get worse for us. So it takes that discipline to keep that level head. You have to be kind of the voice of reason as a company officer. So, you got to keep everybody calm and just kind of give them those orders. So, like I said, yeah, you just want to, we got to keep a lookout for our people, and try not to get sucked into those tasks. If we do, like I said, sometimes it's just inevitable. We have to help. There's some things are task heavy and it's hard for one or two people to do. Help out when I can, but then back up a little bit and just keep watch of what's going on. So,
Jake, do you have any tips for everybody in regard to tools, engine company setup, such as hose lays or so forth, to really go along with your short-staffed circumstances?
Yeah. So with our assignment list, so we kind of when we came up with it on our shift, we even created a tool list. What's if you're an nozzleman, what tool are you carrying? If you're an officer, what tool are you carrying? So we actually came up with all of that stuff. The nozzle firefighter, we want them to do, they're worried about the hose. That can be, that's their tool. But me as an officer, I carry a box light or some sort of a flashlight, and then I'll have either a small hook or a small Halligan. So I try to keep, because again, an officer, I'm kind of everywhere at the same time. So I want to be lightweight, quick, and easy to maneuver. So I might be back up on that line. So I don't want to be bringing a 6-foot hook in with me, or even just a full size Halligan bar. I just have a little 20-inch mini pro bar. That's my personal tool, and then a 4-foot hook. Depends on what the call is, what tool I bring in. But we do have those tools that's required. So as a company officer, like I said, light, tick, and one of my tools. So I'm going to be a backup guy on that line. That's what I'm doing. Our irons firefighter, they're typically going to be, bringing in the set of irons. That's kind of their setup. They're going right to that front door right away, making sure they can get in. So, and then second due, depending on what we need, they'll either be bringing in hooks or just irons and things like that too.
Jason, what do you think about hose loads in regard to short staff?
Fast and effective and simple.
Yeah, I would say there's no real one quick answer, but
no. And we run. It's kind of a modified Minuteman with ours. So it's kind of our pre-connects connect from the top, and we run a modified Minuteman where we can pull from either side of the truck as well. So that's the hose load we have for our pre-connects. We do have a pre-connect 2.5 out the back of our engines as well. That one has a 100-foot bundle, and then just kind of a static, another 100-foot of supply. So, but yeah, fast and effective. Again, fast water. You put the fire out, everything else gets easier. So,
isn't that the truth? All right. What else you got, Jay?
It takes practice. It takes time. But like I said, you even said it right away in the beginning. It's the reality for a lot of departments having short staffing. And really, like I said, what made me want to write this article is what works for us. What works for us might work for somebody else. I've been my whole career, I've been, that's what I'm used to is just, that 10 guys. Like I said in the article, I can't even think about having companies in staging, what to do with that. Pretty much it's an all hands all the time for us. It does have its drawbacks though. Like, we talked about, like I said, in the end, there's a little bit of a safety with it as well. Like it's not uncommon it's like a big fire. I might have, 3 bottles that I go before I can get a full rehab. We don't have the people to rotate out. So we are worked a little bit harder. But again, it's what we have. We're doing the best with what we can. So, you have to kind of think of that as well. Especially if you're running short staff and your IC, you have to think about your people, keep your people in mind, because they're going to be working hard. They're going, you don't want to, you put them in a precarious situation. So keep your people in mind too. So.
No, outstanding. I can't agree with you more. We always try to give Jason and I both. He still sits on NFPA 1710. I was on 1710, and there's a lot of this country that just can't comply with it. Even though we try, we admit that that is definitely the standard that you want to try to achieve, because you can't ever argue that 4 people on a truck is less than 3. I mean, there's a lot of versatility and a lot more functionality you can achieve, but we have to also train for reality. And I think that that's the approach that you've taken in your fire department.
Yeah. I can't, we've done great things. So
Well, Jake, thanks for joining us today, and thanks for writing the article. Good information, because I would argue that most of the country are facing the same and similar challenges that you and other small departments are dealing with. So it's a good way for people to be able to see what other places are doing and how they're being most effective with what they have. Anything you want to close with, or if anybody's got questions about the article, how they can reach you?
Yeah. So they can, reach me. My email, J Jorgenson, Jorgenson at watertownfirerescue.com. Feel free to reach out. I'd be more than happy to, give you our assignment book and stuff that we have. So it works for us. But yeah, reach out. Otherwise, you can find me on Facebook, message me on Facebook, Jake Jorgenson. So yeah.
Awesome stuff, Jake. Like I said before, you can find this in June's Fire Engineering. July's is out, and let's see what we had. I'm playing with the new Boomcaster, Jason, so I'm split screening here. If I screw it up, you can blame me later. But yeah, so July's is out. Make sure you go out, and if you haven't gotten it yet, or if you're not, if you don't have the ability to see fire engineering, make sure you get it. Sign up. You can go online or get it. I like personally looking at it, the hard copy. But as you can see, there's some great articles in here this month. Jason and I will be going over them, and hopefully bringing you somebody next month from this outstanding delivery of fire engineering. But what do you got on the horizon, Jason, coming up? I know you got something big. You'll be traveling to Maryland. Why don't you tell everybody about it?
Yeah, just a little over a week. I'll be in Maryland with a lot of other outstanding instructors and board members for the FDIC 2026 show, and we will be going through classes and speakers and the show in general. And it's always a very educational and informational 2 or 3 days, and it's really the ramp up already. Actually, the ramp up started a little over a month ago when we started reviewing submissions. The process for that several, I don't know how many people total review, but that process has ended, and now they go to the different board, and we'll start looking at those at the end of the month. And that's like the kickoff for FDIC. That's when you start getting your notices. That's when you start seeing the program coming out a couple months after that. So it's always exciting and always an honor and privilege to be there, and really looking forward to seeing everybody.
Yeah, definitely. And the notices will be going out probably around August.
I would say the middle or late August, yeah. It'll
be exciting. Some newcomers. Speaking of which, like I stated before, Jake was a newcomer to fire engineering, and we need to get people out there writing tactics, and I applaud you for doing that. You had told me, and I know we're getting off here in a second, but I do want to bring that up, that you told me, what made you write this article. And just, if people think that, well, no one wants to hear what I have to say, it's not possible. Tell them how possible it was for you.
Yeah, it was an awesome opportunity. Really kind of, we were talking about earlier, I was driving into work, listening to one of the the Rick Lasky, John Salka podcast. They're talking about, if you want to write for fire engineering, just write, submit it, try it. So that's what I did. It was just something that I was passionate about. We deal with it daily. It's kind of a, it's our, our little special thing that we work with. So I was like, oh, I'll put it to paper, sat down, wrote it out. I submitted it onto the website, and within a few minutes, it seemed like Diane reached out and said, we like it. We'll use it. And I actually, Jim, actually, I think you were actually one of the technical editors for my
You're not supposed
article.
to know that.
So,
No, I'm just kidding.
It was an awesome deal. I was, just super excited that it was crazy, I'm from Watertown, South Dakota. Half the people around here probably don't even know where Watertown is, or ever heard of it. And then, a big magazine like Fire Engineering said, oh yeah, we like what you have to say. So, it was a great opportunity, and I'm thankful for it. So.
Good for you. And more people need to do that. And if you have questions or you're uncertain, email it to me. Email me and contact me, jhoevelmann@gmail.com. I'm happy to offer any advice I can and get you published. We love our current authors. We love the ones who you see frequently, but we also want new authors. And like Jake and Jim just mentioned, just because you think you've seen it in the magazine before or someone else has talked about that idea, everybody's got a new spin and perspective on it. None of us have created anything really that we've written. We've just regurgitated it from our own experiences and backgrounds. So, and tactics, lots and lots of tactics, and that's always the thing, right? That's what makes fire engineering so much different from all the other publications, and what makes it such an incredible and hands down the best publication for training is the topics.
Realistic and current.
Yes.
Which is very important.
The current part is why we need new authors.
That's right. All right. Well, thank you all for listening. This has been another great edition of Fire Engineering's Tactical Impact. And for now, I'm Jim Silvernail. This is Jason Hoevelmann with our guest, Jake Jorgenson. We'll see you next month. Thank you very much, and be safe out there.